One of the joys of the dot-com revolution, a revolution in which I've played a role and participated gleefully, is that it has created an incredible amount of examination and introspection into business processes, self-development processes, and so on. And I learned something very interesting that kind of confirmed um, a supposition that I had, and I want to share that with you because I think it's going to help you get started on things. I want to share that with you next on this episode of the VO Heroes podcast. I was reading an article written by someone who was describing their process of investing as an angel investor, which is usually the first round of investing in a business idea, smaller numbers, smaller amounts of cash, different returns on investment, as opposed to the big investments that we always hear about, the big million, billion-dollar investments. These are more like hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, seed money. And this investor was talking about why they preferred to invest in a company that already had gotten started and was either struggling or needed some guidance or needed some access to certain markets, as opposed to building a business from scratch. And it got me thinking, based on the way he described this, and I'll share that description with you in just a moment, it got me thinking about how we as performers are constantly trying to hone and refine what we do, but we have a distinct advantage over creating a whole new thing rather than taking what we have and making it better. And what he said was, it's a lot easier on a scale of 1 to 10 to go from 1, which isn't so great, to 10, which is awesome, than it is to go from 0 to 1. And that was just like so awesome for me because it made total sense. You've heard me talk many, many times about getting started and how hard it is sometimes for people to do that. They have to line up their pencils and make sure they're all sharpened and make sure all their papers or move the papers on the left side of the desk to the right side of the desk. And now I'm ready to get started, right? But there are some people who just dive in, make a mess, make mistakes, whatever. And what he was saying was, because some of us have a reticence, a hesitation in actually taking that very first step, it makes it even more difficult to go from having nothing, having done nothing, having created nothing, having experienced nothing, to experiencing the first of 1,000 steps, right? That first stab at a process, or that first audition, or that first ability to use a piece of tech, or whatever. It's always a bigger hump to get over going from 0 to 1 than it is to go from 1 to 10. Meaning you've already got something, you know whether it works or it doesn't work, right? Going back to the definition, my definition of success, do more of what works and less of what doesn't. You already have some example that either worked or didn't work. And you can either keep doing the same thing if it worked, or you can change it if it didn't work, in either case, making it better as you repeat the process. That's a lot easier when you have like a lump of clay that you started with and you're trying to make it prettier, make it better, right? So this notion of it's usually harder to go from 0 to 1 than it is to go from 1 to 10 is something to bear in mind when you're faced with beginning something new. Just notice that, say it to yourself, remind yourself of it, and then, choose to answer it like, yeah, not today. Today, I'm going to go from 0 to 1. Or when you're presented with, I tried that, it didn't work all that well. Well, okay, take a look at why. Take a look at why it didn't work well and go from 1 to 10. Or go from 1 to 2. And then from 2 to 3, and then from 3 to 4. So I think this notion of it's easier to go from 1 to 10 than it is to go from 0 to 1 is something that will make our lives easier as we approach such a crazy world as voiceover, as acting, performance in general, We're constantly starting new things. I mean, I think about it. I thought about it the other day when I had to sit down to do a self-tape audition. You know, if I had to reset up my equipment every single time, that would be a lot harder than for me to sit down in front of my equipment like I can here and go from 1 to 10, go from not having something done but having a little bit set up to having something done. Anyway, I could beat this to death. I don't want to do that. But I would love to know what you think of this notion. And if you've experienced the hesitation of getting something started because it's such a big thing and you don't know if you're going to fail and you have the fear of the unknown, those fears that we've talked about in other episodes. And if it's easier for you to go from, I don't do that so well, but I can make it better, or I don't know how to do this. I need to get a coach to help me, or I need to get a consultant to help me, or I need to go to YouTube and look at some videos, or I need to ask David what to do, to go from 1 to something higher than 1. And 1 to 10 for that investor was easier to do than starting a company from scratch. I just found it fascinating. Tell me what you think in the comments below, really. And if you're not watching this on VOHeroes.com, please go do that. That's where the conversation is, nice and sane and controlled, and I don't have to, get rid of comments that are goofy. Anyway, that's it. I appreciate it. I'm David H. Lawrence, 17th. I thank you so much for watching and for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the VO Heroes podcast.